Mayadibhischa varanayar. Mayadibhischa varanayar. Ashtabir bahiravritam. Ashtabir bahiravritam. Etat bhagavaturupam. Stulam te vyaritam maya. Mayadibhischa varanayar. Ashtabir bahiravritam. Etat bhagavaturupam. Stulam te vyaritam maya. Mayadibhischa varanayar. Ashtabir bahiravritam. Etat. All these Bhagavataha of the personality of Godhead. Rupam, form. Stulam, gross. Te, unto you. Vyaritam, explained. Maya, by me. Mahi, the planets. Adibhihi, and so on. Cha, unlimitedly. Avaranaihi, by coverings. Ashtabhihi, by 8. Bahihi, external. Avritam, covered. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace of Bhagavatam Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Thus, by all this, the external feature of the personality of Godhead is covered by gross forms such as those of planets, which were explained to you by me. Purport. As explained in the Bhagavad Gita 7.4, the separated material energy of the personality of Godhead is covered by 8 kinds of material coverings, namely earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and false ego. All these are emanations from the personality of Godhead as His external energy. These coverings are just like the covering of clouds for the sun. The cloud is a creation of the sun, yet it actually covers the eyes, so that one cannot see the sun. The sun cannot be covered by the clouds. The cloud can at utmost extend a few hundred miles in the sky, but the sun is far greater than millions of miles. So a 100-mile covering is not competent to cover millions of miles. Therefore, one of the various energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot, of course, cover the Lord. But these coverings are created by Him to cover the eyes of the conditioned souls who want to lord it over the material nature. Actually, the conditioned souls are covered by the illusory creative cloud of matter, and the Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to their eyes. Because they have no eyes of transcendental vision, and because they cannot see the personality of Godhead, they therefore deny the existence of the Lord and the transcendental form of the Lord. The covering of the gigantic material feature is accepted by such men with a poor fund of knowledge, and how this is so is explained in the following verse. Om Akyanati Mirandasya Grananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasma Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadate Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttabarkalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sargashatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sachivam Sadvetam Savarutam Parichana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Varan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamshta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sati Devi Pranamami Hari Prem Ancha Kalpadurubhascha Kripa Sindhyabhemacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So we're in this last chapter of the second canto. The famous title Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions, and so we heard answer after briefly hearing at the beginning about all the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. Then we heard so far about the Lord's creation, the primary creation, the Sarga. And so we heard, and how did we hear it? We heard it especially in the way of how to help us understand that even all the material creation, which seems to be separate from the Lord, that it also depends on the Supreme Lord as Him, as the person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so we heard it in the way of understanding the creation as the Lord's Virat Rupa, as His universal form. And so we heard how all the different senses came by the Lord's desire to see, to taste, to all the different sense activities, that by His desire then the senses as well as with the objects of the senses. So we heard in the three forms of Adhyatmic, Adibhautic and Adidaivic, and Adidaivic then being the controlled demigods who are presiding over this particular sense, or the presiding deities of the senses. So those three aspects of all the senses, how they can be conceived as coming from the Lord's universal form. And so now we heard coming from the senses now to the like the last three verses were then about 31, about the 7 elements of the body, and like skin and all of that. Then 32 was then going more subtle about the false ego, because after all we know it's the false ego which is ultimately enabling the conditioned soul to be in the material world and experience material nature, because only if we misidentify with matter will we have any impetus to actually interact with matter in forgetfulness of the Lord. Whereas if we would be in our pure form, a spirit soul, as a spiritual being with spiritual senses, fully conscious of the Lord, of our relationship with Him, then we would have no impetus at all to interact with matter, meaning in forgetfulness of the Lord. So it is, but for misuse of our independence, to give us this facility, the Lord creates also the false ego, which is this subtle covering of our soul, the most subtle material part of the material body, which enables us to misidentify with so many different material bodies that we get awarded, like we discussed yesterday, in all different lifetimes, different human bodies, different species of life. And then, so today we came to describing, I'll just read the translation again. So it said that, thus by all this, the external feature of the personality of Godhead is covered by gross forms, such as those of planets, which were explained to you by me. So seems we are heading to, it's the end of the description of the Virat Rupa. Because then tomorrow's verse is going to explain that actually there's a transcendental manifestation of the form. That actually what we heard so far is not the real eternal form of the Lord, but as we said, it's simply a conceptualization to help us relate to the Lord as a person, even though we are fully engrossed in matter. Because, as we said, because of this false ego, of our desire to lord over material nature, and our conception thus to think we can find happiness simply by being interacting with matter. So today is the last verse of about the Virat Rupa, and Prabhupada starts off the purport with famous verse from Bhagavad Gita 7.4 about where Krishna himself lists those 8 material elements which he calls as his separated material energy, named Pinna Prakriti Ashtara. So he says, Pumira Puanalo Vayaho Kamano Buddharevacha Hankara iti Yame Pinna Prakriti Ashtara. So the 5 Mahabhutas, the 5 elements that we can directly perceive with our eyes, as we know, Pumira, earth, Analo, water. Sorry, no. Appa is water. Analo is fire. Vayu, wind or sky, or not sky. Sorry, air. Air. Even that we cannot see with our eyes, but still we can directly feel it with our skin, for example. The blowing wind. But then sky is even ether. Is still part of those 5, but we can't perceive ether with our gross senses. That's the sky. So that's where everything else, all the other elements are situated in. And then even more subtle than that is then the 3 subtle elements, namely mind, intelligence, and false ego. And Prabhupada goes on to saying that all these are emanations from the personality of Godhead as his external energy. So, and then he goes on giving the nice example about the sun and the cloud. Because all these are emanations from the personality of Godhead means that, yes, Krishna himself calls it his separated energy, but still actually nothing is separate from Krishna. As we know, this very conception of thinking anything separate from Krishna, that is simply Maya, that is illusion, that which is not. Still Krishna himself calls it like that because he creates this very energy for that very purpose, to make it appear to be separate from him. Because, as we said, because there are those souls which do misuse their independence, and thus they need this facility of the material energy. And for that reason, Krishna thus makes this energy appear to be separate from him. But still, and the other point, which Prabhupada is explaining here, is that because it appears to be separate from him, or rather, also then when we are situated in that energy, identifying with matter, with the separate energy of Krishna, then we also lose our ability to see Krishna himself, to see spirit. And Krishna is the supreme spirit, soul. But this doesn't mean, as Prabhupada explains here, that actually that Krishna himself is covered. How would it be possible for something which emanates, which is from him, which is dependent on him, that would have the power to cover him? Obviously, it's not like that. Just as Prabhupada gives the example here with the sun. The sun is practically unlimitedly more powerful than any amount of clouds that can be in our sky. The sun, we know, is illuminating the whole material universe, and not just illuminating, giving also heat. And by doing that, also it is on the sun only which drives the whole water cycle, which evaporates the water from the ocean, in that way forms the clouds, and then the clouds pour down the rain on all the different parts of the planets, and thus bring the water to the land. And from there we know it is stored, some of it on mountains and glaciers, or other different water resources, lakes and wells, and comes down then in the form of rivers, eventually down to the sea again, to the ocean. So this shows that obviously, but from our vision, when we go out on a cloudy day, we cannot see the sun, and so we foolishly might think, oh, the sun is covered by the clouds. But it is not that the sun is covered by the clouds. The clouds don't have the power to cover the sun. It is simply that the clouds cover our very limited, imperfect vision from where we are at that point. And similarly, it is the material energy doesn't have the ability to cover Krishna, but it is simply us who we are. Even though we are spirit soul, we are the para prakriti, we are the superior energy, we are not apara, as that's 7.5 then, as Krishna explains in the next verse, about the superior energy as well, which is superior to those 8 elements which we just discussed. But, as we know, we are superior energy, but we are infinitesimal, and thus, by misuse of our independence, we put ourselves into a position where we get covered by this inferior energy, by material energy. And by that covering, then we lose our ability to see Krishna, and to see reality. We see only illusion. We see everything as being independent, separate from Krishna. And yeah, so then Prabhupada says like one another nice sentence says is that, but these coverings are created by him to cover the eyes of the conditioned souls who want to lord it over the material nature. So again, the point, it is not that the Lord has any desire to make us suffer. Like he's not a sadist thinking, oh, okay, these rebels, I'm gonna put them into illusion perpetually. I'm not gonna allow them to see me, to see my unlimited beauty, but let them rot there, struggle with material nature. No, it is because of our free will that we do desire to imitate him, and for that, reluctantly from his side, he is doing that. But actually, of course, he personally doesn't have a desire. Rather, it is more like, when a father has some of his children who are, for some reason or other, just cut off their connections with him completely, just went off and foolishly think that they can find their happiness by just living independent of their father and showing zero gratitude for everything they got and how they were maintained and raised and got education and all of this, and simply try to do their own thing. And thus this means that the father he can't, because of their decision, he is then not able anymore to give as much love and care to them as he would like to. But still, as a loving father, he never stops to love his children, and so he still will be always on the lookout if he somehow can help them without directly interfering, without them seeing it, or if he can eventually guide them back again to come to their senses. And so that's the position that we put Krishna into. He doesn't, it is rather from our side, it's like, actually a great offense, and it is hurting the Lord that we choose to want to be separate from him, that we choose to be in this material energy. But still, although Krishna, he is, on the one hand, of course, he is Atmaram, he is completely self-sufficient, completely satisfied by himself, and doesn't depend on anyone or anything else for his pleasure. But still, at the same time, he can still always increase his pleasure unlimitedly more by loving reciprocation, by getting unconditional love from unlimited living entities. And that's, after all, the point of the whole existence. Otherwise, Krishna wouldn't need to expand, to emanate all those different energies and different living entities, but he loves to. It's as Prabhupada says, we see that in material life also. There's even material happiness, you can't get much if you're just by yourself. That's why we see people, even especially nowadays it's very Kali Yuga progressing. Unfortunately, family life getting worse and worse. That people in general, they are not even able to have peaceful families. There's so much quarrel. That's the meaning of Kali, right? Kali Yuga. But still, the tendency is there that people actually they do want to have families, they do want to have children, someone to give their love to, and to have loving exchanges. So that's even in material life. So why would, and all, we know everything, ultimately all the tendencies come originally from Krishna himself, from the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so, it is natural for him wanting to expand and wanting to still, even though he is Atmaram, he's completely, as you know, we discussed in this chapter, that all those other 9 topics are simply there to make us better understand and direct us to the 10th topic, which is Krishna himself as the Ashraya. He is Svasharasharaya. He's his own shelter. Everything else is sheltered under him. And thus he is the Summum Bonum from whom everything emanates. And also, like in terms of, even though being self-sufficient, still wanting to expand and having loving exchanges, there's one beautiful purport in the 3rd canto, chapter 31, text 38, where that's actually where Lord Kapiladev explains to Mother Devahuti about the power of Maya, in that case specifically in the shape of a woman, where he says, just try to understand the mighty strength of my Maya in the shape of a woman, who by her mere movement of the eyebrows can keep even the greatest conquerors of the world under her grip. And Prabhupada gives there a beautiful explanation of like how it actually is that like from a different, more ultimate, original angle of vision, how it is that this sexual attraction is like so strong in human beings, even that which can even bring down. We know many stories of like Vishwamitra and who fell down due to that, even though being very austere and very advanced. And Prabhupada explains there that it is because originally it is tendency of Krishna himself to wanting to be attracted by a female. You know, that's why the highest loving exchange is between Krishna and Srimati Radharani. That's why Gopinath is always here with Radha Gopinath. He is not alone. So, because Prabhupada explains, I'll just read those few sentences. So beautifully that it says that when the Supreme Lord wants to derive transcendental pleasure, he has to create a woman from his internal potency. And obviously we know that is Srimati Radharani, the pleasure potency. So, even though Krishna is Atmaram, already self-satisfied, still, to really experience the highest pleasure, that he has to actually create a woman. And we know also all the other living entities, we are simply here further expanded. Also we are all women in that sense. We know there's only one Purusha, there's only Krishna, who is Purushottama, and all the others, we are simply Prakriti, we're energy to be enjoyed by him. And so and actually, in another sense, all of us, we are simply here to assist in the love between Radha and Gopinath. So I'll just finish what Prabhupada says further here in that purport. He says that thus the tendency to be attracted by womanly beauty is natural because it exists in the spiritual world. But in the material world, although we understand it is natural because originally from the spiritual world, but we know in the material world, of course, it is reflected pervertedly, and thus there are so many inebrities. But when we are attracted by the transcendental beauty of Radha and Krishna, then we are no longer attracted by material feminine beauty, because then Prabhupada quotes, of course, Param Drishtva Nivartate, because then we are fixed in the higher taste of experiencing being enjoyed by Krishna rather than trying actively to enjoy and thus imitate him. And and further then two texts later, Prabhupada, Kapildev himself, he explains, and then Prabhupada explains in Prabhupada that association with women begins when one accepts service, because they are especially created by the Lord to give service to the man. So that again shows that originally, why did the original woman manifest? Because Krishna wanted to enjoy, and in other words, Krishna wanted the loving exchange of receiving transcendental loving service from Srimati Radharani. And so that again shows that, all of us, we are created for that purpose, and that's our position, to serve the Lord and thus be enjoyed by the Lord. And so where were we here? So that these coverings are created by Him to cover the eyes of the conditioned souls who want to lord it over the material nature. So for us, for conditional love like that to be possible, yes, we need to have this free will, and unfortunately some, like us, we do misuse that, and for that the Lord has to create these coverings to cover our vision of Him. And then Prabhupada first says, and the Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to their eyes. So actually, the service of Maya is, yes, to give us the facility, but also to lord it over, to misuse our independence. And at the same time, in that way, because we do have this false mentality, which is not natural to us as spirit souls. So we would be disturbed in the spiritual world, because there it's let's go to that maybe. Like Prabhupada, I think in Bhagavad Gita, and one Prabhupada, he explains that actually, because now we heard recently all the different senses, how they came from the Virat Rupa and so on, that actually the material senses, they are simply a covering of the spiritual senses. Like we do, the point that we might forget sometimes, that actually, yes, the spirit soul, we also do have senses, but they're simply covered by matter. And thus, the sense activities are exhibited in a perverted way. Whereas, in our pure spiritual form, we also engage our senses. We engage them actually much more completely and perfectly, because they're in pure love of Godhead. It is actually, there's like a transcendental competition, like Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains beautifully. Unfortunately, I don't remember any details, but that's the end of Antya Lila. Whole of Chaitanya Charitamrita is absolutely amazing, but that's like a really nectar section where he describes how actually the spiritual senses, they have like a competition of one, in our completely purified state, actually one sense, like each of the senses wants to its full capacity serve the Lord. Whereas now in our conditioned state, many times we might feel, maybe I'm already too much service, how much more should I do? I need time for myself. But actually in our pure state, there's no question of that at all. Rather, there's